The system itself is really good at what it's really good at. If you have a heart attack, we can literally have you in the ER, have you stented, have you anticoagulated, save your life in 2 to 3 hours. If you have a chronic issue like chronic fatigue, fibro, gut issues, IBS, post-concussive syndrome, mystery illness stuff that some people say is psychiatric, some people say is anxiety, this is a terrible place to be because our system is super academic, super specialized, and super focused on evidence-based medicine, which puts these blinders on. A lot of times the experts don't know, and they don't know what they don't know, and they promulgate what they do know as if it's the gospel, if it's the only thing, and there's so many gaps in it. With my daughter, the system 100% failed her. The average kid with her diagnosis at 20 has had 13 surgical procedures. She's had 0, okay? And so our decision to jump off the beaten path has led down to different outcomes for her. So big picture is we're really good at what we're good at, and we're really bad at what we're really bad at. How do we fix that? How do we bridge that gap?
I'm super pumped today, everybody, because I'm here with not only the Dr. Aaron Hartman, but my friend, Dr. Aaron Hartman, and we're buddies, and we have gotten to know each other over the last year or two. And so his perspective means more to me than just someone I'm listening to on other podcasts. So anyway, Dr. Hartman, super excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Are you ready to dive in on a couple of topics here?
Scott, I'm ready to rock and roll, man. I'm a little scared after you said that. I feel like I have a lot to live up to now. So,
well, you live up to it without a question. But we're going to kick off with a big topic, and I think this topic is on everybody's mind: the modern healthcare system, broken, building towards something better. Where are we sitting at right now? And what is your perspective? You have a unique perspective in that you are a MD and a functional medicine doctor. You've had the ability to look at both sides. I'm super interested in where you feel we are and where we're heading.
Yeah, I mean, just to fill that out a little bit, I'm also a clinical researcher, had a clinical research company, published in Lancet. I'm an assistant clinical professor at the medical school, have my own company. So I've got an interesting perspective, but also realized that with my daughter, and part of our story that is that the system 100% failed her. And so it's hard. So I think, and as we have these conversations, I'm changing the way I think about things a little bit. But the system itself is really good at what it's really good at. If you have I'm in Virginia, Midlothian. If you have a heart attack, we can literally have you in the ER, have you stented, have you anticoagulated, save your life in 2 to 3 hours. Bam, done. Right. If you have a car accident, my son got his head crushed in an elevator, years ago, got him to one of the top pediatric neurosurgery places on the East Coast within 45 minutes. I mean, there's some things we're really, really good at, like this acute care stuff. If something really bad happens to you, if you have a massive accident and you need multiple orthopedic surgeries, like Virginia is an awesome place to be, right? If you have a chronic issue, like chronic fatigue, fibro, gut issues, IBS, post-concussive syndrome, mystery illness stuff that some people say is psychiatric, some people say is anxiety, some people say it's mold, maybe it's Lyme. This is a terrible place to be because our system is super academic, super specialized, and super focused on evidence-based medicine, which puts these blinders on. So if you're in my wheelhouse, and I'm the world's best left ear surgeon, and you come to me with a left ear surgery problem at the Medical College of Virginia, you're good to go. But if you come in with chronic fatigue, fibro, body aches, pains, you'll get referred to 5 specialists, get 5 different diagnoses, 6 different medications, 3 surgery recommendations, and leave having no idea what's going on. And many times, if you're a woman in this system, you get gaslit. It's all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you. You can't be helped. And you leave feeling like it's your fault. I want to remind you and your audience, and this happens all the time. In the 1970s, there was a disease called frigid mother syndrome. And frigid mother syndrome was kids with perceptual problems, integration issues, speech issues. It was autistic kids. But it was before you knew what autism was. And so we said, oh, it's mom's fault. You're a frigid mother. And we literally blamed autistic kids on their moms. And it just blows your mind to think about, we did that in my lifetime when I was a kid. And my question is, how are we doing that right now? So big picture is we're really good at what we're good at, and we're really bad at what we're really, really bad at. How do we fix that? How do we bridge that gap?
I know that you That's an amazing answer. You did such a great job of advocating for what's great and what is working, and then some of the things that we're not maybe doing as well. And I'm going to get to your daughter's story because I think that that's a great resource of kind of showing how you built it. But I'm going to tease the audience a little bit first because I'm going to go right into a pertinent topic that has to do with what we're talking about right now and this healthcare system in general. We just saw in the last couple of days the food pyramid shifted, and it's amazing, right? This is so interesting. I think there's actually a South Park episode where there's this emergency and they're like, just flip the pyramid, and everything's fine. And all of a sudden, they pretty much flip the pyramid and they're now utilizing real foods and meats and dairy and things that have always been kind of in our lifetime have been criticized and demonized more and more year after year. We both have been in the discussion of eggs are great for you, then eggs were awful for you, then it was good cholesterol versus bad cholesterol, and our parents' generation sometimes are like, I don't know what to believe because we've been fed so much. So the pyramid shifting. Talk about nutrition and this for a second because I just think it's such a great topic.
I mean, you got to think about where did the food pyramid even come from? And it came from a government committee getting experts in the field with special interests involved to put together recommendations for the country. And the government then did a really good job of promulgating that. Fats are bad. They cause heart disease. Let's cut it out. Let's remove these saturated fats. And what were they replaced with? Healthy whole grains, which ended up being processed grains, ultra processed foods. And what you saw was heart disease skyrocket, obesity skyrocket. And oh, by the way, in these processed foods, there's also chemicals, there's dyes, there's petroleum based products. And so the devil's in the details. Is it the processed foods that are nutrient deficient? Because you remove B vitamins, you remove magnesium, you remove potassium from foods when you hyper process them, and you put fake fats, fake oils, plastic. Literally, what is plastic? What's this plastic? It used to be petroleum, right? Now it's solid. What's margarine? Margarine used to be clear corn oil or canola. Now it's semi-solid. It's a type of plastic. You start putting that in food, and you're like, why are we all getting sick? And then the government's like, we got a better idea. Let's do the food plate, right? That happened during the Obama years. Do a food plate, right? And now it's like, oh my gosh, we're so controversial. Let's just do real food, right? And it's kind of like, and it's funny because I was reading this morning because you probably do the same when you flip through. I flip through social media and through news stuff just to see what other people are looking at, not necessarily to get my information. I need, as a physician and a doctor dealing with people, I need to know what other people are seeing. And there's already debate on, the emphasis of red meat. Is that actually harmful? And, Ben Carson, who's amazing. I love him. He's awesome. His book, Gifted Hands, is an amazing book. But he's like, he's a plant forward guy. And he's like, hey, hold off on the red meat stuff. And it's like, we already have debate, right? Which is good. Debate's good. But it's mind boggling that just the government saying eat real food, take petroleum-based dyes out of our food, which happened last year, which was very controversial. Even the whole thing February, the FDA just took off the black box warning for hormone replacement therapy. We had black box that for 23 years. Depending on what you read, maybe 140,000 women died prematurely for lack of access to hormone replacement therapy. And now all of a sudden, it's okay to do again. And I think the point of that is, technocracy, technocrats, the experts. One thing I learned in my journey with my daughter is a lot of times the experts don't know, and they don't know what they don't know. And they promulgate what they do know as if it's the gospel, if it's the only thing. And there's so many gaps in it. I think this is a great example of, us reversing the page. And this happens all the time. I call these blind spots. These are things that we think to be true that just aren't true. And my question always is to myself and patients, like, what do I think right now that's wrong that I just don't know it's wrong? What did I used to think was wrong I know now differently? And if you go to it humbly like that, with that perspective, as a medical doctor, the very, very first thing I'm supposed to do is no harm, right? And we've lost that sacred relationship with patients. We've lost that caution. Like, I might actually hurt people. Depending on what you read, medical error may be the third most common cause of death in our country. So all of a sudden, things I do, things I recommend, side effects, surgical procedures, if the information is true and that is the third most common cause of death in our country, then I need to be even more cautious than I already am. And our technology-driven, expert-driven, academic-driven world, we're like, it's like we're a bunch of hot shots, gunslingers. I'm the expert. I know best. And it's like, after 25 years of practice, 3 board certifications, starting a research company, 70 clinical trials. I'll tell my patients is I don't know what I'm doing. I'm clueless. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. And usually the patients are like, and I kind of, this is my perspective. Like I'm still learning. And I need to be very humble, but also know what I know that there's things I still don't know. And many times you don't know what they are. And I think this is a perfect example of at an institutional national level, us recognizing we messed up for the past 70 years. We got it wrong and our kids are paying for it. Literally.
Well, I think you even saw the vaccine list adjusted for the first time in a long time, from 70 or to like 23 or whatever the number is. I mean, it's to me, it's mind boggling because I think curiosity, to your point, you are the practice of medicine is a practice of gaining wisdom through curiosity, trial and error, helping humans, live longer and healthier. And what we're seeing is we're still seeing the government still involved and engaged in ways that I don't want the government involved at all in. I really don't care at all. I just want to make sure that um, we're curious and growing. So I'm fine with Ben Carson questioning whether or not he
Yeah.
thinks that meets are a negative towards something that he feels very strongly about. But together, that curiosity, that debate will lead us to the best answers. That idea meritocracy is super crucial. And
Yeah.
one other point I want to make is that, you know, self-advocacy is so important. I think we are the ones that have to know our bodies more than anything else. And I was diagnosed with colitis at 26. When I was 37, 38, it was progressing to Crohn's. I also had a severe back problem at the time. And here's the correlation to life. This is a super quick version for listeners that have listened to lots of my podcasts. You've heard the story before. The 26 was me eating extremely unhealthy and it catching up to me, not knowing that, coupled with severe stress of starting in business, the first 3 years in business, trying to get off the ground, my family getting kicked off, like all the things that were that inflammatory challenge. I learned early on that my body responds in a way of severe inflammation and not very well to stress. I'm very good with mentally with my stress, but the body responds in a different way and starts to scream out. I might get eczema. I might have all these things that I've now at 47 paid attention to. At 38, the gastro doctor, I wanted to go through everything as a self advocate. What can I do? How can I change it? Cold therapy. I started doing cold plunging and cold therapy. I started doing physical therapy, more exercise, changed my entire diet, cut all these things out. The point I'm getting at is through that, I will go to the gastro doctor for a normal checkup and he will say, I still think you're a miracle. Like you've changed everything. There's no record of the Crohn's and colitis. And you know what I did? I just figured out that I was doing a lot of the wrong things and I became an advocate for myself. And I'm still not doing all the right things, but I'm better than I was and I can get a lot better. And if everybody's doing that and all that information's out there, then I can actually do it faster.
And I think that's one of my points. Like with my wife's health journey, took us like almost 5 years to work through some of her issues. And it's like if she had met me and had my information to read, 15 years ago, that 5 years it could have been compressed into maybe 6 months or a year. And that's I think part of the reason why I do all the educational stuff and the blogs and the podcast is like there's a lot of self-driven people like you who are like distrust the system. They want reliable information and they can figure it out on their own if they have the guide. And so but to the whole vaccine thing, I wrote a couple of things down here. One, I'm pro-vaccine, I'm pro-science, and I'm anti-stupid. So what does that mean? Like polio vaccine, we kind of sort of need it. Now there's no polio active in the United States. It's actually in Afghanistan, Pakistan. Maybe you can hold off if you want, whatever for a year or two. You know, hepatitis B. Unless your newborn is going to have sex with prostitutes, do IV drugs. Why don't you wait till you're at the age that you have sex with prostitutes and do IV drugs, whatever that age is today, right?
You
Like
mean
I
they
don't
don't
think it's
need it? They don't need it immediately, Aaron? They don't need it
no,
right on the
no.
second they come out?
For some reason, most infants don't have sex with prostitutes. I'm not sure why, but it's not a thing. But that's like the anti-stupid. Like, why is that controversial? the hip vaccine, the Prevnar vaccine, literally eradicated pediatric meningitis from our country. Like I have not seen pediatric meningitis. I had to go to Ecuador actually to see it because of that those two vaccines, right? So there are utility for it, but you know, the one vaccine, the HPV vaccine for young ladies, it's has one of the highest side effect profiles of any vaccine, particularly with hypermobile young women, POTS, dysautonomia, autoimmune kind of stuff. And there's a gene, you can actually test for a gene that looks for your risk for reacting to the vaccine, actually. How many doctors order that? None. And so all of a sudden, it's like, in the right population, that vaccine has some utility. But then pro science, pro history, what has made the difference? Cervical cancer was the most common cause of death of middle aged women in the 1950s. What made that go away literally so that I've not had any of my patients die from cervical cancer? It was a pap smear. It wasn't the vaccine. So we found a cure for something we already figured out, and so it's kind of like, vaccines have their place. I'm pro science, but I'm just not do stupid stuff for no good reason besides someone smarter, wiser, and administration or whatever says it's what you're supposed to do. And I feel like, that was kind of our experience with a lot of things. That's the whole medical blind spot thing. We could talk about, maybe we shouldn't talk about the pandemic experience, but to your point, in today's day and age, like we're gone are the days where DuPont just dumps lots of chemicals into the river and gets by with it. Like they now get billions of dollars and hopefully do it a lot less now. But there's so much information, you can literally shut down the crooked doctor, the crooked business by just a bunch of bad social media posts, and they're out of business in 3 to 6 months. There's almost too much information, actually. And so I think self-advocacy, people being self-driven and having reliable, dependable source information, AI is making that better and worse. So it's like it's like that. But
Well, hold on, go that rabbit hole for a second, because that is, how is AI making it better? How is AI making it worse?
Because I can take AI and I can take, you send me a message, hey, Hartman, I'm confused. I've actually did this just the other day. I'm confused. You sent me this list of stuff. I got lost. And I'm looking like it's going to take me hours to look at your chart and figure out. And I just go back, cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. Hey, organize this based on their history, on the top 5 things they should do right now. And it gives me and then now give the whole thing. So then I take that. It takes me 5 to 10 minutes. I put it together, send back. Hey, Scott, these are the 5 things you should be doing now. When you feel like you can do the next, simplify it, do these. And so what would have taken me maybe an hour and a half to go back, I'm doing in 10 minutes. So it's actually making me more efficient at like low level stuff, right? It's really good for that. At the same time, I'll be like, hey, I'll have research or I'll have labs come in, and I'll be like, hey, I don't do this anymore because of this reason, but I'm going to have AI give me, look at them real quick. And then what's AI think, right? And I have all these protocols and things I have plugged into my own GPT. So it's not just the Wild West. And it started giving me answers that are wrong. Like it made normals abnormal. And if I hadn't looked at the lab result, actually, I would have said, hey, Scott, this is off and that's good. And it was wrong. And so AI is going to AI. It's going to do its thing. And so you have to be smart enough and know enough to know when it gives you bad answers. I think that's the danger. People don't realize that it's crowdsourcing. It's not actually agentic. It's not creating new things. It's basically finding what's out there and basically giving that back to you. So, and sometimes it just makes stuff up because it's a predictive model. And the more out you ask it to predict, the more likely it is to hallucinate. And so, and with medicine, it's really funny. Like, would you want AI to build your house for you, to do your blueprints for your house? No. Would you want AI to figure out your soil base and figure out what kind of footings you need done for your house? I mean, no. Like, why? So why do you think AI is going to figure out your health issues? Like, it's almost so funny. Like things that we know are technical, like engineering and architecture and stuff. I mean, we're using it to help experts do better, but they're not. They're not saying, "Hey, I'm going to build my own house by myself because I'm an expert." AI build my house for me. Like, maybe one day, but not right now. But yet we do that with our health. And that just kind of boggles my mind how we can be so cavalier with something that literally is life and death, and super anal about something that's, I won't say just a house, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it completely. Listen, you recently released your book Uncurable: From Hopeless Diagnosis to Defying All Odds, and it's really it starts with your daughter's story as being the catalyst. I think it's good. We teased it a little bit earlier in the conversation because it's such an impactful part of your life, an impactful part of your family's life. Walk us through this relates to the healthcare system. This relates to everything we're talking about right now. walk us through the story and what you're seeing today as so impactful with these changes that you've made and the adjustments um, along the way.
I mean, my journey with my family was I'm this typical doctor, academic minded, above average intelligence, hard worker, like all the things you want your doctor to be, right? And doing well in the military. And one day my wife was like, "Hey, this little girl, Anna, her foster home's closing down. Would you be willing to bring her in, foster her, maybe adopt her?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? We can always give her back, right?" And I literally said that, by the way, Scott. I actually said that, and my wife didn't smack me. She just was like, "Okay, dear," because she knew that I would eventually fall in love with Anna. So she kind of, was a smart one there. But
You're
so
just
I bring
being
my house.
factual, Aaron. You're just being factual. You did not mean it in an insensitive way. It was being factual.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a very for good and bad. I'm a very goal oriented, goal driven, duty driven. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Gets me in trouble, but it's kind of just the way I'm kind of wired. But anyway, so I'm bringing her to the house and like, hey, she's small, she's failure to thrive, right? She's really itty bitty. Her diagnosis, her birth mother did crystal meth the entire pregnancy. She had a stroke before she was born. She was born functionally blind. She was never supposed to walk, talk, or crawl. So her prognosis was pretty bad, and she was itty bitty. And the doctor was like, "Hey, you got to make her fat, feed her." So I was spending, hour feeding her dinner. It was time consuming. Goes back to the doctor, the GI doctor, the gastroenterologist, your friendly gastroenterologist, and they're like, "Nope, still failure to thrive. Now we're going to put a feeding tube. We're going to do surgical procedure, cut a hole in her stomach, put a plastic tube in so we can pour formula, and we'll standard of care. We'll get some meat on those bones." And talked with my wife, who is a pediatric occupational therapist who works with kids with special needs. And actually, she was the OT who started seeing Anna when she got out of the hospital. And one of her best friends, Whitney, was a PT that was seeing her when she got out of the hospital. So it's like friends and family kind of thing going on here. And we talked about speech development. Speech, chewing, and swallowing is a part of learning to talk. So if you take that away, it's going to affect speech. But she's never supposed to talk, so don't worry about it. Crawling and walking. If you have a plastic tube out of your belly, it's kind of hard to do the army crawl, right? Because you might pull the tube out. And that happens. Sometimes the kids will pull the tubes out. But don't worry about that because she's never supposed to walk anyway. So we were like, my wife was like, something's there. She's going to be okay. And we just said, no, we're not going to do this. And the system did not like us saying no. We were reported to Child Protective Services for medical neglect because we wanted to give our daughter real food. We refused to give her fake food, and we spent the time to feed her. And it's kind of like, and that happens in the special needs world. A little side note, that happens all the time with kids with rare diagnoses, difficult diagnoses, where the mom has said, "Oh, you're Munchausen's, you're making this up, you're abusing your kid." And there's been cases of actually parents losing their children for months at a time because the system said, "You're an abusive parent. We're going to take your kid away." And 3 months later, "Oops, we're sorry. You're just doing the best you can." And that's kind of knowing that happens. We're kind of thinking this, get evaluated, jump through the hoops. Um, and the funny thing was, my wife actually knew the nurse who investigated us because they shared patients. So it's this like, do you know who we are? Like, we're actually pillars in the community, and just reporters at Child Protective Services. Like, come on, man. Anyway, so worked through that. 6 months later, though, Becky, being Becky, doing her research, found a growth chart for kids with my daughter's diagnosis, and Anna was 50th percentile. She was right in the middle. And that's when, like, the first aha moment was the system doesn't like it, whatever, I'll move on. The second aha was the experts don't know. The specialist, she had no idea. This was a blind spot for that doctor. She had no idea. And if we'd followed her recommendations, she would have had one surgical procedure, leads to another, leads to another. A side note, Anna's turning 20. The average kid with her diagnosis at 20 has had 13 surgical procedures. She's had zero. Okay. And so our decision to jump off the beaten path has led down to different outcomes for her. And that was my inflection point. So how's she doing now? Your question is, why actually, I'm sorry, I mentioned this before we started recording. So she's able to read. She types, her reading actually and writing just developed in the last 6 years over different therapies we've been doing with her. She does all of her ADLs. I mean, actually, Scott, we talked about this before. She's actually getting ready to move out of the house to a community called Vanguard Landing down where you live, to have 3 roommates, have someone taking. She's literally getting ready to move out and have her own life. And this is a kid that was supposed to be slobbering on herself in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. And that would have been her outcome if we'd done the standard of care, if we'd followed the normal path. And so the book we talk about this, but my admonition is to people is don't accept the standard of care, don't accept status quo. If you want to get unseen outcomes, you want to see if you want to get unusual outcomes, you have to do what other people aren't willing to do. And that's what we've been doing with her. We've done with our other daughters, we've done with my wife, and that's kind of changed my practice of medicine and what I do as a doctor now.
Yeah, it's such an amazing story, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her, and not only is she going to be living closer at Vanguard Landing, which is a new facility in Virginia Beach. So we'll put that in the show notes. So anybody that's interested in learning more about it, as well as potentially donating towards the cause, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity there. So it's just good. It's worth mentioning. But how many children are not getting that advocacy? How many children are coming into this world and not having that level of opportunity? And what you're giving her is the ability to see something through in a way that's her exponential growth is amazing. I mean, her energy in the room is powerful. I don't care. I was in a room full of entrepreneurs and her energy in the room is powerful. So it is quite interesting, and I commend you and Becky for the extra work. But it's also exciting to see the work that you put in, the love that you've given, and how that has really grown over the years into something special. And her growth as a human has been amazing. So I think that's such a great story.
Yeah, but it's not just about her. Like we adopted my second daughter who had a very similar story. And she, neurotypical, besides being petite, you'd have no idea she had a similar story. My son Khalil, who had horrible eczema and asthma, and he's 15, his skin, he hasn't had an asthma attack since he was like 2. My wife had health histories, but ultimately health issues. But ultimately, it's changed my practice of medicine, and my daughter's story has changed thousands of people's lives. And that's the thing that's really cool for me. Like with her struggle, I want her struggle, I want her difficulties. I mean, she still works, she still struggles, she still, life is hard. It takes her an hour in the morning to get ready. I mean, it takes me 5 minutes, right? It's things are still hard, but she's living her best life. She has no regrets. And like her life has have impacted so many thousands of people. And one of my things is like, I want her difficulty, her suffering, her work. I want it in my mind, in order for it to be worth it, it needs to have a positive impact on as many people as possible. And that was part of the book, was like to share that story and realize, if this little girl who was abandoned, crystal meth, stroke before she was born. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that, right? I mean, can beat every single solitary odd, then I think you can too, right? And so it's meant to be an encouragement. And also in the book, we give people tools and resources, free resources and stuff to get people started on their journey. But I think people, it's like marketing. We talk about marketing. We talk about our entrepreneur meeting marketing. It's like people need to hear good things. We hear bad stuff all the time, like all the bad things in the world, all the bad things in school, all the school shootings, all this stuff. We don't hear good things enough. Like you need to hear about good things, about people succeeding, about people breaking the odds, about people doing things other people thought they couldn't do more. That needs to be what we hear about more, not all the bad stuff. Because really, that's what makes our country run. That's what makes our schools run. That your business, my business, that what makes it run is people doing unusual, unheard of things in a super successful way. And that's also how you change other people's lives as well.
Well, I like it when we were talking pre-show, you said, I love biohacking. And honestly, Scott, biohacking healthy people is easy. When you're biohacking for people that have severe challenges, it's a whole different ballgame. And it really that is something that you spend every day doing. I mean, your practice is a practice of thinking outside the box, not just for healthy humans on how they can optimize and maximize their life here, but also and more specifically for people that maybe are the odds are stacked against them, and you look to help solve that.
Yeah, and the thing about that's a lot of people. Like, think about your circle of friends. How many kids have autism, ADHD, pain in his pants? How many people have a kid who has, a young lady who has hormone issues or fertility issues, like, or guys with low testosterone? How many people have like this, I'm fatigued and I'm tired and brain fog, and they're like, what's going on? Like, this is like the new normal. And so, and the fun part in my mind, because I kind of enjoy this. I enjoy difficult stuff. Your chronic fatigue, right? Is it mold? Is it Lyme? Is it post concussion? I had got people who had concussions and playing college football, high school football, and they're in their 50s now with brain issues. And it's like, and we do a special scan called a neuroquant, and you're like, oh, your brain looks like a TBI brain. This is not, this is your TBI that no one ever took care of, that's slowly been breaking down. And so to really figure out the why behind, these diagnoses, it's my jam. It's what I really enjoy doing.
Well, I think it's interesting because you mentioned that we have all these people that we know. I can't tell you how many times someone reaches out to me and they're like, "Hey, I have an autoimmune issue," and they're just talking in conversation. They're like, "This is the first symptom, and maybe it's something with the gut. Maybe it's something that's not as talked about." But at the end of the day, the very first thing that I tell them to do is really start to dive into all the other options that might exist of, have they evaluated their diet? Have they looked at other resources? Have they reached out to other doctors? Because we're so quick to just take whatever the first person tells us and do it. No, they told me I'm going to be on medication for the rest of my life. No, they told me I need to put this what is it, biomedical, what is it called, the shot in the gut with the human
Oh,
uh
GLP-1.
no, that's a different, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's a whole different conversation. But I think ultimately we're
Oh,
very quick.
biologic. Yeah.
Biologic, yeah, the biologic, that's what I meant. The biologic, I mean, I remember when they told me that that was my resource, I was like, man, I don't think, it was so scary to me to think
Yeah.
that I would be shooting myself with something for the rest of my life. Now, little did I know that I'd be utilizing and
Yeah.
leveraging peptides for the last 6 months, and using them in a different capacity, but
Yeah.
it's a different thing, and I think that is, such a great way to have other options, to have somebody who's looking to advocate that way.
Well, it's funny. So to your point, this is, Scott. So, you said Crohn's was the diagnosis.
Also, it was also colitis at 26,
Okay.
and then at 38, when I went back in, because I had to have the evaluations and the colonoscopies, which are really fun when you're young, and so I had one at 38, right when I was starting my new company. So in 2016, I'm starting my new company. I just turned 38. I haven't had any issues with colitis in a number of years. I've had no problems, no signs. And the doctor's like, wow, your intestinal tract looks like it's been eaten alive by moths, and you've got to figure something out. And so now it was progressing to Crohn's at that point in
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So, so let's just use inflammatory bowel disease. I had a young kid come to me. Couple examples. they're 14 years old, diagnosed by the local GI with Crohn's, and they're like, do a biologic, and the mom's like, no way. Went to Boston Children's, big hot up in Boston. They said, no, not that biologic. This biologic, it's newer. So the mom lived in Richmond, came down, saw me, and was like, hey Hartman, is my son going to be on these for the rest of his life? I'm like, let me do my thing. He had C. diff colitis. No one checked him for C. diff. I gave him Flagyl for 4 weeks. Bam, gone. It's like, why was little old Dr. Hartman behind St. Francis Medical Center the person that was diagnosing this? Another patient with Crohn's comes to see me. Oh, I've got these. He's in his 30s, got fistulas, yeast overgrowth syndrome. So we treat his yeast, do some hyperbaric, and all of a sudden stuff's healing up and he's in remission. And now he's got a pretty strict diet. Another patient with inflammatory bowel disease, and he was actually a pastor at a local church, like had no money, couldn't support supplements. He's like, I'll do anything. I just don't have resources. And I'm like, well, let's try this thing called an autoimmune paleo diet, super extreme. Let's put, some basic peptides, some basic colostrum, just some basic things on board. And he's been symptom free for like 5 years. And so my thing is, you might have the same diagnosis, but there's many roads that lead to Rome. And that's where I think people get confused, because they're like, you might have an inflammatory bowel disease, but why? Is it a yeast overgrowth and intolerance to yeast, intolerance to strep? Isn't it, some people will get these proteus or these bacterial overgrowths, and part of inflammatory bowel disease is you actually develop self-intolerance to bacteria or yeast in your gut. And so all of a sudden, is that the issue? Is it another infection? You can actually get, it's interesting, 30% of kids with non-responsive inflammatory bowel disease actually have a chronic CMV colitis, which is a virus, right? So is it a viral thing? So like, why do you have what you have? And and this is, I think, one of the dangers in like in this world of functional medicine is people have their story. Like, I fixed mine with autoimmune paleo. I fixed mine with peptides. I fixed mine with hormones. I fixed mine with whatever, with mold. And now that's the answer for everybody. And it's like everybody's got their own journey. And that's, I think, one of the strengths we have at our practice is because we do it all and we've seen it all. It's like I've had patients with inflammatory bowel disease and also Lyme disease. And you treat their Lyme and their gut got better. And so yeah, I love your story. You figured your own journey out over years and years and years. You got it squared away. That's great. Could you have accelerated that? Absolutely. But I think the danger is people like being like the niching, like, oh, I'm the gut expert, and they do the same thing for everybody. It's like
Yep.
everybody needs something different. You can't do
Well,
the same thing.
I don't even know. I don't even know if I figured it out. At the end of the day, all I know is at the time, the decisions that I've made to change so many things. In the beginning, I took everything out of my diet. I mean, I cut out dairy, I cut out gluten, I cut out everything. And I was going to my mom's a big Italian Sunday dinner, and I'm telling her I can't eat anything. And for a year I did that. And then I finally started reintroducing things. And we had dinner together at a great steakhouse. And we had a great dinner. We ate similar things. We drank a little bit of wine. It was European wine. It
Nice. Yeah.
was the kind of thing that you pay attention to, these little nuances that as I reintroduce things back into my diet, Italian pasta made in Italy with the right kind of semolina and the right kind of area. I mean, these are all things I didn't pay attention to and I couldn't afford in my early 20s. Today, I'm paying attention to them because they make all the difference in the world, but I haven't had to reduce them. And I still don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm just trying to be an advocate for my own body to help figure out what works best. And I tell my family, I'm like, listen, you can get mad at me that we're not stopping at a fast food restaurant, but I'm a Ferrari and I need the best oil, the best gas. And that's just the way that it is. And I'm really sorry. I know that's annoying. I will not stop somewhere fast. I will stop and we'll sit down and we'll have real food. But you know what? It's better in the long run, and it helps me run in life. And I think that's for high performers. A lot of people who listen to this podcast are people that are moving too fast, and a lot of times have to go back and reset because these things kind of push us over.
Yeah. Well, an interesting number, 80%, according to the US government, and they're always right, correct, right?
They're always right.
Yeah, they're always right. I believe everything your government tells me. Um, but according to them, and sometimes, I mean, they do a really good job of collecting data, to be in all honesty, like the EPA, USPFTF, and Haynes, all these really big, they do a great job of collecting data. What boggles my mind is they collect this data, like what I'm about ready to say, and then no one tells it to anybody else. And it's like just sits there. Like, okay, great. For example, according to the EPA, 30% of heart disease is directly related to lead exposure. So if you're a cardiologist, shouldn't you be a lead expert? Like, how many heart patients get lead levels done? None, unless they see me, none, right? But according to the government, 80% of heart disease and 70% of most cancers can be prevented by diet and lifestyle alone. So all of a sudden, real food, adequate sleep, stress reduction, 80% of heart disease, 70% of cancer goes away. Like, stupid simple, ridiculously easy. Like, why don't we yell that from the rooftops? And so now we're flipping the food pyramid upside down and people are getting mad. It's like, you know, it'll work itself out, but it's just my thing with patients and people, like, you perfect the basics. I think you played, so you can know your son plays soccer. It's like, perfect the basics. When I wrestled in high school, my wrestling coach, he was wrestled for VMI, was a national champion. He could do one thing. He could roll you. He won national championship being able to do one thing, no matter where you're at, it doesn't matter what you're doing. He didn't need to be touching you. He's like, Hartman, I'm going to roll you. Like, you're not even touching me. I was like, you're not even touching me, old man. Right.
Yeah.
And then 2 seconds
They
later,
rolls you.
yeah. Yeah. But like, you need to perfect, and professional athletes perfect the basics, kicking, passing, whatever. And we need to perfect the basics, real food, adequate sleep, adequate sunlight, stress reduction, meaning and value. It's amazing. All this research is coming out now in the pediatric world, and like all the bullying stuff going on. If you have 2 kids going through the same situation, one kid has a stable home, 2 parents, they actually handle stress at school way different than a kid who doesn't have a safe home. And all of a sudden, just having a safe, caring, nurturing environment can be the difference between a kid becoming suicidal and a kid just being bullied and moving on with life, And so all of a sudden, like your Italian heritage, I mean, there's this really interesting study with Italians that came to the United States and Pennsylvania. there's a small group, and they came to this small town, and all the Italians worked at the local factory. Went to the factory, punch card in, punch card out, factory chemicals, all the usual factory stuff. Came home, the dad smoked. They had the nice long dinners for like 2, 3 hours. Everybody's hanging out together, drinking their wine, and they maintained their heart disease risk in country of origin in Italy. Their kids, and those where most of the kids end up going off to like New York and places like that because they don't want to stay in the small town with the parents, right? Would go off, change the lifestyle, and their risk for heart disease would then come up and match Americans. And it's literally you're smoking, you're drinking, you're working in a factory, and you maintain your risk for heart disease in Italy here, but your kids adopt American lifestyle, and all of a sudden now theirs pops up 3 to 4 fold and matches the American. It's like lifestyle, diet, these are the foundational things we need. And this is what we perfected with my daughter, and all the cool fancy stuff. Peptide stem cells, hyperbaric, cerebral lysin, electrical stimulation, suit therapy, I mean, whatever, tasis therapy, was all built on top of that. And that's one of the reasons why she's had these amazing outcomes, is because we built a strong foundation and then put everything else on top of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. As a father of teenagers, one of the things I've noticed significantly is the much higher propensity for acne now. I feel like I see more um, challenges with skin that I ever saw growing up. I mean, when I was growing up, a couple of kids would have something in school, but now it's so normal and it's so challenging. Are you seeing a lot more of that today? And what are some of the things that they might want to pay attention to if they're just focusing on some of the basics?
100%. We're definitely seeing more of everything, period, across the board. It depends on what you want to focus on, but definitely more acne, more rosacea, more eczema, more psoriasis. And I think it's interesting that there's a connection between your gut and your skin. And a lot of these skin disturbances, you're developing an immunologic intolerance to natural yeast and fungus, either on your skin or in your GI tract. And your GI tract has about 80% of your body's immune system there. So what happens is you're supposed to consume, you inhale stuff, everything you inhale, all the dust and stuff you eventually swallow, right? And everything you eat, you swallow. And what happens is your tonsils, your adenoids, the immune system in your GI tract sentinelizes all the stuff you eat and says, ignore, 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 normal, normal, don't react to it. But what happens is when we consume chemicals, one of the gluten things is wheat bread in our country has emulsifiers in it that break down your gut mucus lining that are associated with inflammatory bowel disease. We've got food dyes and chemicals, petroleum-based products in there. It's amazing all the stuff that goes into making bread in the United States. That is absolutely the bread conditioners that make the bread you look uniform, messes up your gut bacteria, and all of a sudden you have a perfect storm for stripping down the mucus, disrupting the gut lining, and then you start reacting with whatever you're eating or whatever bacteria or yeast in your GI tract. And then based on your genetics, that might look up like rosacea, it might look like pustular acne, it might look like psoriasis, it might look like eczema. And that's where like the genes and different things come into play. But the underlying mechanism of action is this gut action messing your skin up. With my son, for example, he had horrible eczema, horrible asthma when we got him. His asthma was so bad that my wife thought he'd stop breathing at night when he slept. And so she made homemade formula. I know, crazy, right? And 6 months later, his skin was beautiful. He's got brown skin, beautiful cafe, just gorgeous skin. All the patchy spots went away. The greasiness, that weird greasy look that a lot of kids with eczema and acne get, that went away. At that point in time, he only would wheeze when he gets sick, and now he only wheezes like when he comes back from church camp because they eat crap there, and he runs around, doesn't sleep, so he comes back wheezing for 3 or 4 days. But it's their gut, and what we're seeing is all these kids developing small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, strep overgrowth, and this is the reason why when you go to the dermatologist, they're like gluten-free, dairy-free, and the kids are like, all right, here's your doxycycline, here's your zithromycin, here's your whatever, and it's like literally probably 70% of them the stuff would go away just if they cleaned their diet up, removed gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, corn-free, sugar-free, and just ate a clean paleo type diet for 3 months. What happens? And so many of them would clean up. But I've had so many patients come in, I've told that to, and most of them look at me like I'm bonkers. They're like, what? I got to eat differently? Like, I'm not doing that. I won't be cool then. And it's like, okay, here's your doxy, here's your azithromycin, here's your, whatever antibiotic, or if it's bad enough a biologic, something
Right.
actually alters your immune system.
Yeah, it's amazing how you almost would rather shoot yourself in the gut with a biologic for the rest of your life so that you could eat the the ice cream that isn't ice cream. And I had just teaching someone the differences in the grocery store of what is real ice cream. So you made the joke about the bread being so bad. I had all these rules that were almost comical, but one of the rules was I wouldn't eat any bread at all unless we were in a French or Italian restaurant and they made their own bread. So if I went into a French or Italian restaurant, I would often ask, "Do you guys make your own bread in house?" They're like, "Oh no, we bring it in from a bakery." I'm like, "I'm not getting it." But when they made it in house, I would order it because I always found that that was one of the things that was such a difference maker. Same with ice cream. All the briars and the things that we grew up having access to is no longer even ice cream half the time. You have to read the carton. They have 3 different versions of fake ice milk and ice cream and dessert and whatever. They're not
Yeah.
even real things.
Let's Scott, to your point, let's forget, for example, let's just forget the use of recombinant both bovine growth hormone in cows. Forget that. Forget the fact that 80% of all antibiotics in our country are used in agribusiness. And so there's the equivalent of 80 micrograms of tetracycline antibiotic in a glass. Just forget that for a second, okay? Forget all the chemicals. Forget the fact when they eat the grain, there's tons of glyphosate in it or Roundup that gets secreted in the milk. Forget all that woo-woo stuff, right? Let's just do food chemistry. Oil and water don't mix, right? Unless you homogenize it. And you change the food chemistry by forcing fat to actually mix with the water. And then if you skim it off, you're actually removing the fat and a lot of the nutrients. So you have to fortify it, right? Then you ultra pasteurize it, you burn the milk, right? So you're changing the protein conformation of it. So literally just the act of homogenization and the act of ultra pasteurizing are changing the food chemistry minus all the other stuff. And so, we're the crazy people who use raw milk. We drink raw milk. We used to make yogurt, kefir. None of our kids have asthma, eczema. My daughter's had antibiotic. My second daughter's had antibiotic once in her life. Actually, Anna's had antibiotic once as well since we had her. Um, Cleo's, I don't think Cleo. No, Cleo's had antibiotics twice for Lyme because he keeps on getting bit by ticks. So, gotta use antibiotics for that. Sorry, gotta use antibiotics for that. When you get
You're
Lyme,
on a farm. You're on a farm. That
you got
happens.
you gotta treat it. You gotta treat it. No, I'm not. No ashwagandha for that. You gotta take some. Some stuff. But the point being is that, like, just using the real food, like we don't have issues with it. But once you start processing it, once you start changing the food chemistry, no wonder we act poorly to it. And that's not even counting all the other chemicals that are in it. So it's like that's who's I say just eat real food. If you want to focus on one thing, and you're like, I don't want to do this, just don't do gluten, dairy, soy, corn. Don't just real food, which means your bread will have 4 ingredients in it: wheat, water, culture, salt. It means your yogurt will have, your milk and your cultures. That's it. It gets super basic. If you see a paragraph of stuff in there with blue number 7 and yellow dye, which hopefully is coming out of the food now. Oh, by the way, they're petroleum distillate products, so petroleum-based dyes, right? Actually, I did this thing. We were in Italy this past year. We were walking around. I think it was Florence, and went into one of these little stores. My wife wanted to go in. And I'm just walking around this little candy aisle. And they had M&Ms. So I looked at the M&Ms. And I was reading the ingredients, and I'm like, they're
Yep,
using like
yep, right.
herbs and plants for the
It is
dye.
what
So I
it
opened
is,
the
isn't it?
package up, and I'm like,
Right,
the colors aren't as bright as they are in the United States. So I went on Amazon real quick and I was looking. I'm like, oh my gosh, like. And then some marshmallows, and like my wife's like, oh yeah, they don't have blue dyes in the marshmallow here. I'm like, why would you need blue dye in a white marshmallow? So like, my wife's crazy. She's wrong, right? Looked it up. I'm like, yeah, we put blue dye in our marshmallows in the United States, and I pulled the one thing, and like, there's no blue dye, and so it's just bonkers. You have to. It's harder to find real food than being gluten or dairy free, right? That's what I tell my people is just real food, and it starts basic. If you can see it, that's an apple, that's an orange, that's lettuce, that's whatever. But even something like to your point, we eat a lot of salads. We do a lot of salad. I make a homemade salad dressing. Most salad dressing they're using a canola oil, soy oil, or some other seed oil that's been typically hexane pure. They use hexane they use a solvent to basically extract it. They use deodorizers. So, for example, canola oil smelled horrible, like in real life, and they actually have used deodorizer to get the smell to go away. And now that gets put in your food. It's like, you know, just eat real food. Just eat real food.
But and saying that it sounds simple, But the reality is everybody listening to this knows that when you choose to do that, like I have for the most part, like most of us, and we all splurge and have something that maybe we don't normally have on a regular basis. But the reality is when you choose to live that way, it is a full-time thought process to make sure that you are buying the right stuff. But I remember my wife brought home some salmon one time, and she was like, "It's." I was like, "Is that wild caught salmon?" And she was like, "Yeah." And it wasn't. It was like the Alaskan. Nowadays we have people shopping for us, right? So they put it in your bag, and so you tell them
Mm.
what you need, and you pick up your groceries, and you get home. And I happen to look at everything, so I'm reading it, and she was like, "You're just being over the top." I'm like, no, it's not wild caught. Read the thing. And there was this whole discussion, might have gotten a little bit heated for a few minutes, but only us argue about the salmon that we buy. But we got over it. And the point that I'm getting at is you have to be diligent at just reviewing what you're putting in your body.
Mm.
And that is such a great point that you're making, and something that I think everyone can walk away with. Yes, it's hard, but it's going to
Yeah.
make a big difference.
Yeah, and one thing, I tell people, Scott, is that it took me with my family probably 2 or 3 years to figure out where to get the meat, dairy, soy, whatever, not soy, meat, dairy, corn, whatever you eat, right? And so, and one of the resources in the book is actually a food sourcing guide nationwide that actually goes through stuff and tells you where to source it. So I have one for patients in Virginia. I have one because Virginia is actually really easy to get real food. We have these amazing farmers markets and farm to table. It's just really super easy, but it's not the case in most of the country. And so that guide, my wife actually, who's my main researcher for a lot of stuff, she actually put it together for me. And it's a resource. If you're like, hey, how do I source my food? It's like, you want something that tells you how to source it. Boom, here it is. I saved you 3 years of time. Just follow the list. And and that's where you have to help people in the journey, not just say do this, but this is how you do it. Don't just become an expert. Don't just start a business like, well, first you got to do this, you got to do that, and like, give people the tools, um, and then they have to use them.
Well, the good news to everyone listening that's enjoyed this conversation is Dr. Hartman and I, with his daughter coming down here to live, are going to be doing more of this, more conversations. We look forward to helping to not only, focus on life here on the High Performance Life podcast, but we also like to focus on parts of life. And one is energy, how we show up to the world, what we put in our healthy bodies, and how we can be better every single day at learning. And I think your story, your objectives, your impact that you're making in the world, the thousands of kids that you're helping is such an inspiration. Uncurable: From Hopeless Diagnosis to Defying All Odds is the book. It can be purchased anywhere, correct?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and then the audio version is available on Audible.
Okay. And if they want to get more information on you, how do they find you?
You can learn about me, www.aaronhartmanmd.com. And that takes like to a little page about me, a mini bio, and then it goes to all my social media, my practice website, my book. It's the hub to get to all those places. So I got tons of stuff out there, but the hub is Aaron Hartman, MD.
Well, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. And until the next time.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Looking forward to the next time.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.